Symbiosis. There were these great forests standing undisturbed for millennia. We invented clear-cutting efficiency and the gasoline-powered chainsaw. The land was found full of life and 1,000 kinds of plants. We created lawns of overwatered, chemically treated, heavily fertilized grass. The rivers teemed with spawning salmon on both wild and lonely coasts. We built dams and cut down the trees that sheltered their tiny fry. The buffalo, grizzly, wolf, and elk roamed the plains in uncounted numbers. We devised agribusiness to monocrop and to hold our livestock as prisoners. The land held great wealth of silver, gold, oil, iron, and coal. We gave free rein to gouge it out and walk away for 7 cents an acre. Snow fell white and pure and lay undisturbed all winter in the valleys. We turned it black with our exhaust and the oil spilled on our great roads. Aquifers deep within the earth stored up clean water for 1,000,000 years. We pumped it out in a heartbeat to irrigate subsidized crops for cows and snack foods. Sometimes the smoke from great unchecked fires blanketed the land for weeks. Now, every day we belch out more toxic gas in unimaginable volumes. Songbirds in their millions greeted each and all the spring mornings. There are many now who have never heard them, and so cannot miss them. The oceans teemed with fish in numbers deemed uncountable. We wiped out these so-called free goods using modern industrial techniques. Men lived in tiny bands whose small messes soon healed over as they moved on. Now we squat in our own wastes by the millions under thick and toxic clouds of our own making. A group could strike out on its own to lands where no one had ever lived. We installed roads leading to identical strip malls from sea to shining sea. Every spring the gentle showers would slowly wake the land from a long winter. These days the acid rain poisons the lakes and stunts the trees. A myriad of frogs croaked from 1,000,000 scattered wetland patches. Today a tiny fraction still linger, many sporting exotic deformations. Grasses, flowers, field mice, and hawks lived in many meadows. Weeds, broken glass, rats, and cockroaches share empty lots with drunks. The great cats padded along in their mystical silence throughout the world. Now we require the use of the entire habitat that sustained them. The cetaceans with their huge brains flourished in the oceans for 1,000,000 years. 50,000 dolphins are sacrificed as factory fishing bycatch every season. Orangutans spent untold generations adapting to the remote jungle habitat. Today we cut the trees down from underneath them in their so-called preserves. In the past the wolves would howl and the loons would cry out in the stillness. Now we roar on by in our loud trucks with 150 decibel music blasting. It used to be that our numbers made sense in terms of what the earth could bear. Now the researchers say our population will stabilize at around 10 to 12 billion souls. Every child could believe his life might be better than those who came before him. More and more grow up to mine garbage and carry water in dirty plastic buckets. The sun was cool in spring and one could count upon a dark freeze-up every November. Now each year is up among the very hottest that man has ever witnessed. There was a time before plastics when we already had electricity and running water. Today there are electronic chips implanted in our beloved pets. Just a little while ago my own grandmother rode in a horse-drawn wagon. Now you can make a reservation to travel as a tourist into space. As children we rode 3 across in the back seat of a hot and old sedan. Now our kids simply must have video games, DVDs, and personal air conditioners. Man witnessed the parade of the charismatic late Pleistocene megafauna. It seems now we are responsible for one of Earth's great mass extinctions. The lakes were filled with fish and there was always a larger one to catch. The government now warns against their consumption due to our pollution. The great eastern forest stretched from New York to Chicago. Now the trees and wildlife survive there merely for our decorative pleasure. Man and the bonobo evolved together, sharing 98% of their DNA and homelands. Today we eat them even as we destroy their remaining jungle habitat. Giant bluefin tuna raced with warm blood throughout the world's oceans. As we catch the last of them, their market price simply goes even higher. Our old-growth forests sheltered complete ecosystems for 10,000 years. Our technology replaced them with sterile single-species tree farms. Galileo was absolved by the Church for his heretical notions about the universe. Our evangelical zealots seek a religious debate with scientists over evolution. Oral traditions and rites of passage guided young men to tribal adulthood. Our fatherless youth must invent a directionless but violent culture on their own. Children learned the phases of the moon, the constellations, and the useful plants. Now they clamor for fast food and the latest electronic entertainment. Just yesterday, one-income families with children could afford a summer cottage. At this time, speculators from faraway cities have driven up all the prices. In the old days, family farms dotted the plains for hundreds of miles. Modern agribusiness has consolidated its holdings for industrial efficiency. We paddled the lakes in rowboats and canoes, murmuring and laughing. Now jet skis whine and smoke from late morning right through the long twilights. Previously, there existed a social contract between workers and their companies. Today, the corporation discards people like so many useless byproducts. In the past, the New World was filled with natural mysteries and untapped potential. We have successfully built an unbroken network of convenience stores. The old folks help stitch the children into the tapestry of their families. Now the elderly are seen as useless drooling fools to be ignored or swindled. We minded our own business until called upon in times of great world crisis. We protect our freedom and democracy through preemptive wars of defense. Left alone, rivers meandered, sheltered tiny fish, and brought rich farming sediment. Channelized, they provide no shelter for birds, and their runoff fouls the sea. The grasses, swamps, and woodlands caught and held the precious rainwater. Acres of concrete now drain their oily burdens straight into pathetic creeks. Every small town had its own hardware, grocery, pharmacy, and feed stores. Merged and downsized corporations now provide for our every modern need. Bakers, butchers, and small marketplace vendors were part of our everyday lives. Superstores stocked shrink-wrapped steaks shipped inside dirty semi-trailers. Polar bears and seals shared the dance of life for thousands of generations. The ice melts and the bears must disappear right along with their prey. Tigers stalked for eons in the shadows of the volcanoes on Kamchatka. The last of their penises are drowned in expensive oriental soups. Humans thrive while covered by a multiplicity of protozoa. Now household cleaning products speed the evolution of disease organisms. For uncounted lifetimes, worms, bacteria, plant detritus, and silt tended to the soil. Pesticides, fertilizers, pivot sprinklers, and machinery are now in charge. For eons, the earth and its atmosphere played out their many graceful cycles. In 100 years, we have altered the CO2 balance, right along with the climate. Men took creatures as guiding spirits and thanked them for their sacrifices. We assume a dominion which permits atrocities on animals with God's blessings. In a delicate choreograph, chicks hatched just as their insect food appeared. With spring coming earlier every year, the insects have gone, and baby birds must starve. For centuries, tropical mountain glaciers have served as natural reservoirs. With their melting, people will go thirsty during the long and hot dry seasons. Coral reefs sheltered ecosystems for millions of underwater generations. Dynamite, cyanide, high temperature, and UV rays have devastated them. Fetid swamps were known to reek with highly poisonous, miasmatic vapors. The cities built in their places filled infants' brains with mercury and lead. Man was viewed as the measure of all things during the Age of Reason. We now rely upon faith-based initiatives to light our superstitious ways. Astronomers have mapped the universe and can see 14 billion years into the past. 11% of our population cannot find our country on a globe of the earth. Our forefathers were amazed at the teeming schools of cod in the Atlantic. Experts now wonder if there yet remains even a viable breeding population. The mighty Colorado crossed the desert and fertilized the diversity of its delta. Now it dries up in the desert, leaving behind only salt, chemicals, and fertilizers. The Grand Canyon offered awe-inspiring, crystal-clear panoramic vistas. Nearby coal-fired generation plants now obscure the view on a regular basis. For centuries, the Anasazi lived in cliff dwellings and grew enough food to live. Now the water is all spoken for, and the great droughts have returned. The Kwakiutl people competed to give away more than their neighbors. The government now helps the poor further the aims of the rich. The orcas and cetaceans have longer histories and brains as large as ours. Studies have shown that we have contaminated their blubber and their milk. The Plains Indians were marvelously transformed all too briefly by Spanish horses. Electricity, running hot water, and the automobile are also very briefly recent. We conquered, tamed, surveyed, cleared, settled, and developed the New World. We lectured the Third World on protecting its precious natural heritage. Type A leaders swaggered and intimidate while helping themselves to millions. In court they claim ignorance and blame their runaway lackeys for corporate swindles. The press as the Fifth Estate was admired for its ever-vigilant role in a democracy. The government produces news stories that are shown without attribution. Science spoke slowly and carefully, always admitting to a measured uncertainty. Now it is a small leap of faith from uncertainty to the literal truth of Scripture. We created the world's first national park, the Clean Air Act, and banned DDT. We disavow global warming, drill in our wilderness areas, and ignore the mercury and lead in our children's brains. 30 million or 99% of native peoples perished in a brave conquest of the Americas. Yet all our shame and recrimination is over the Holocaust in Europe. Great storms came from millennia off the Pacific, and trade winds kissed the Caribbean. Smog from China and sandstorms from Africa sully our cars and lungs. Over thousands of generations, the indigenous discovered medicinal plants. Big Pharma patents these as profitable drugs, while the forests disappear. Clever designers make fast food packaging from plastic made from fossil fuels. Every day we toss a blizzard of them on the ground and calmly walk away. The Bible provides rich examples of a broad and humane philosophical wisdom. We pick and choose our quotes to justify our venal and self-serving motives. A myriad of species from mammals to bacteria intertwined in the web of life. A leveraged corporate network of producers and suppliers greedily sustains us all. Humans spoke with thousands of tongues, each supporting a different culture. Mass media guides our beliefs, and we all text in a pidgin English.